Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by a grant from New Mexico Tech on the frontier of science and engineering education for bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees. New Mexico Tech is the college you've been looking for. 1-800-428-TECH.
I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Our guest today is Gore Vidal, man of letters, author extraordinaire, and really an icon for this century. Thank you for joining us.
Well, very happy to be here. I had an aunt called Lorene.
Oh, well, I'm family.
Yes, from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Well, I'd like to talk a little about your extraordinary family, if we can start with your background. Your father worked for the President Roosevelt as his director of
Air Commerce.
And was very interested in didn't he set up some early...
He founded 3 airlines. One, they all morphed into something else. Airlines never made any money. But what happened, 2 unsuccessful airlines would merge together. So his first one was called TAT, which merged into TWA. And his next one was the Ludington line, and that became Eastern Airlines. And he ended up, he and Amelia Earhart started a little airline in New England called Northeast. And it never made a penny, never made a penny. And he owned that till the end.
Well, but he wasn't doing it to make money. He was passionate about planes.
He really didn't like money, you know.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that as I was driving into town, because my mother had condemned me to the Los Alamos Ranch School, where every boy had his own horse. And I loathed it, I must say. But my poor father, they were divorced by then. He was stuck with, she was married to a Mr. Auchincloss, who was a member of the Standard Oil family. So my poor father was paying Standard Oil bills from me being at this school, which none of us liked, you know.
But how did you even hear about the school? This is before it became the Los Alamos Project.
Oh, yeah.
So it was supposed to be...
It was a well-known boys' school. Yeah. It was for rich, disturbed boys. I was not rich, nor was I was more disturbing, perhaps, than disturbed. And my mother was a lunatic, and she just decided I had to go there. And it was a very bad idea. But I did do a lot of excavating. Part of the school was on the site of an old pueblo. And within 2 weeks, I was excavating the pueblo and really threatening to hit anybody who tried to get me to play baseball.
Well,
so by the time I finished, I'd excavated the ground floor of the pueblo.
Wonderful. Well, this will be a more happy visit to the area for you. Speaking of your mother, her father was Senator Thomas Gore of Oklahoma.
That's right.
Tell me a little about your relationship to him. I know you read to him a lot. He was blind.
He was blind at the age of 10, two separate accidents. And then that wasn't going to stop him. So he practiced law with his 2 brothers. They had eyes. And then the word came that something was happening in the Oklahoma territories, and he was very, very political. And he went out there to become a senator, and founded a town called Lawton, Oklahoma. He and my grandmother settled there, and in 1907, exactly a century ago, he brought Oklahoma into the Union and was elected their first senator, and served until 1937, I think it was. And he was a stabilizing force for the Republic, I think. He did not like foreign wars. He would be in a rage today if he saw what was going on. They were all pretty much isolationists, the old boys of that period. His father had been in the Civil War. Although the Gores were never secessionists. They were against the South seceding. But you went where your family and friends went, and they went off to war. And my great-grandfather was wounded at Shiloh and went on to become county clerk of Webster County, Mississippi.
So you are distantly related to Al Gore?
I don't think it's all that distant. We never knew. I knew Albert Sr., his father. He was a nice fellow. But T.P. Gore was the Senator Gore, and Albert was just a minor player in Washington. The big Gore then was Grady Gore, who owned the Fairfax Hotel, where Albert Sr. and Albert Jr. lived for many, many years, and had the only good restaurant in Washington, the Jockey Club. And Grady Gore had two daughters. They each kept running for governor of Maryland. I can't remember whether one of them ever made it or not.
Well, I'd like to talk a little about your life. You were born at the hospital at West Point.
Yes.
And, of course, going to the Los Alamos boys camp. But you did, at an early age, join the U.S. Army.
17, yeah.
And that is where I'd like to mention your latest episode, your latest chapter of your autobiography, because it's called Point-to-Point Navigation. And this is a wonderful, wonderful book. It just came out, and explain, because this title comes from your early Army days. Tell us a little what point-to-point navigation means.
Well, I was with Army ships, and we had a larger fleet than the Navy in number of boats, not in tonnage. And I was first mate of an Army freight supply ship in the Aleutian Islands, where you never could chart a course. We never got to see the sun, stars, or moon. So we went point-to-point navigation. You had to memorize the landscapes, the seascapes, the mountains, the islands. It's very dangerous. I still have nightmares about it. You know, I've taken a wrong turning, and up ahead is a volcano. But somehow I survived. I gave my knee for my country. That was about it. Hypothermia.
So, as a structure for this autobiographical piece, then you kind of go from highlight to highlight without having to have a cause and effect linear template. That's why it's such a pleasure to read.
Well, it keeps you going anyway.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It certainly does. So you were recently in New York to receive Penn International's Literary Service Award, their first time, for your courage and your honesty. It's quite a fabulous award.
It's one of those "is he still breathing" prizes. You know, everybody says with surprise.
But
after 80, you get a lot of these things.
Yes, but they did wait with bated breath to hear what you had to say about literature today.
Well, I hope they're not bating their breath now.
So I just want to give our viewers a little. It's so hard. You have had such an incredible life and career, but I'll just try to summarize it. You've written over 25 novels, short stories, screenplays, plays. Your wonderful period after 1950s, you've been writing these incredible books of essays, one of which I'd like to point out. You got the National Book Award for this collection of essays called United States, and they're essays from when to when?
What does it say? 52 to 92.
52 to 92.
40 years of essays.
40 years of essays.
And the book weighs 3 pounds.
Yes.
So just don't rush and buy it. Go slowly with a wagon.
And another book I'd like to point out, it's called, another collection of essays called America, or it's just called The Last Empire. And
I sensed when I wrote it that our empire days were over.
Well, we'll be talking a lot about that in the second half of the show.
Right.
So you started your first novel you wrote when you were in the Army, and then you wrote in 8 years? You wrote eight historical novels. You wrote these.
No, I had eight novels, just regular novels. But because of The City and the Pillar, which the New York Times did not like, it's a very poisonous paper, they refused to review 8 of my novels in a row, which drove me into television, movies, and the theater. Kind of enjoyable now that I look back on it, but at the time it was pretty shocking. And they do nothing but grind axes. They're always trying to get somebody for something. It's a lousy paper, and always misquote you.
Yes, yes. Well, was it a sort of literary McCarthyism then, that you were really blacklisted?
I think very much so, yeah. Very much so. And many other people were, too. No, they were trying... They had their own little cozy group, which now we call them neocons, but we didn't know what they were then. Most of them were communists. They were Trotskyites. And I was sort of a fellow traveler along with them at the time, because most liberals were. And so Arthur Schlesinger decided to give us the Americans for a Democratic, what was it, action? ADA. To make sure that we were not confused with terribly radical people. And I thought about Senator Gore, my grandfather, with founding the Populist Party. That was about as radical as you can get in those days. And toward the end, he had a rather stormy last term in the Senate, because he was defeated in his final election. But it was, but he couldn't figure out who was more powerful, the Socialist Party in Oklahoma, of all places. The Socialists in Oklahoma, they were very strong there, or the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, my gosh.
He said, you know, it's pretty desperate to sit here between these two groups that I don't like and be told I've got to make up my mind which one I like. So he, as usual, said nothing very tactfully. He did observe if there was any race other than the human race, I'd go join it. Got him off the hook.
Now, speaking of fellow travelers, I know that that has a literal meaning in terms of affiliates with the Communist Party, but you were acquainted with and had long, long friendships with some of the literary beacons of our times. I mean, I'm thinking of certainly Tennessee Williams and Norman Mailer and Paul Bowles. I loved what you wrote about him and that. So who are the people that you look back most fondly in the literary realm?
Well, you know, we were not very, I'm what they call the war generation in the 1940s, and we were not terribly convivial. In other words, we were mostly solitary people. And we just didn't hang out together, unlike the Brits who just, you know, from the school days to the graveyards, they were taking in each other's laundry. And we weren't really like that. We had alliances, you know. Tennessee was a great friend, and I learned how to be a playwright just hanging around when he was producing a play. And that was very interesting. And his genius was the short story. He's better than Chekhov. And I think toward the end he was beginning to realize it, because he would take them and use them as, you know, as a foundation for a play. And sometimes the play was not as good as the story, but he changed the generation anyway.
He certainly did, and your plays were so well received. There was Visit to a Small Planet, and then
The Best Man.
The Best Man, and then the Richard Nixon piece in '72.
That's right. Yes, there's somebody sent me a note about that the other day. Unfortunately, I called it An Evening with Richard Nixon, not realizing no one on earth wanted to spend an evening with Richard Nixon. No, even the most depraved Republican didn't want to do that.
Well, yeah, he still is down on the bottom of the bottom rung of the Republican ladder. You did a lot of screenwriting too. You wrote Suddenly Last Summer, and The Catered Affair with Betty Davis.
Yes, I've got my French godson is staying with me now, leading me around, and being raised in France, he never saw many Betty Davis movies.
Oh.
So we were having a Betty Davis festival at the house. It was amazing how good she was.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Flawless.
You yourself were persuaded to do some acting too. Was that fun?
Yeah, I was saving money on a production, you know. I wouldn't have to pay another actor to do it. But, yeah, acting's very nice. It gets you out of yourself. And I always found if things go wrong, you better take an acting job or anything not to be you for a while. And when my friend died, I was I went straight to New York, straight to Broadway, where I played in a play about, what was his name? The Blacklisted writer.
Oh. I don't remember.
Oh. Just ring me up out there, somebody in the dark. Tell me who it was. And he was he was a wonderful letter writer. These were his letters that we were acting.
Well, I know that movies were a great influence on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mickey Rooney was one of your early heroes.
I just saw him on television kissing the
Queen's hand. You're not supposed to touch the Queen.
No.
Who Mickey Rooney could probably do anything.
I think so.
So, how do you feel now with movies being such an important part of our culture? And what is the relationship between books? Can an author influence the world anywhere near as much as a filmmaker or an actor?
Well, I don't think films influence anybody. They've become very proud, these film directors, and by and large, their work is not serious in the way they would like it to be. No, they. Well, everybody talks about, oh God, the ninth muse, they call them in Italy. It's a new art form, and it's the only vital one, and literature is dead. Well, our readers may well be dead. I get that feeling sometimes, but the work is still being done, and I think the most interesting form of writing is the essay. It's the last place where a writer 1,000 years later is addressing a reader, just head on. Montaigne is talking to us across 500 years. Now that is communication.
Yes.
And it's very, well, I find it electrifying. And much favor that as a form of writing, and also for reading. Then there's, I was always being troubled by people. And I said, that how much I liked Midsummer Night's Dream, Max Reinhardt's version in the films. And they said, oh no, don't let the movie people get off with Shakespeare. I said, well, how wonderful. I read it up in Los Alamos, Midsummer Night's Dream, and then I read my way straight through Shakespeare. At the time I was 17, I'd read all the plays. That can happen,
Yes, but what a school in language
with a
for
good
a young
movie.
writer, yeah.
And not understanding half the words, but made it all the better.
And I think that when Mickey Rooney played Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream, that was one of your favorites.
That's what I wanted to be Puck, yes.
Yes. Well, on some levels, I think you have. I think you've enchanted us, and you have worked magic on us. You describe in your writing that Montaigne's use of the word essay is. Would you give us the literal translation from the French? What is an essayist trying to do?
An essayist. The essay comes from the verb essayer, which means to try. So you try to explain something in an essay. So what you're writing is an attempt to, and you attempt, generally, you should cover the waterfront. I mean, if you're going to talk about, Iago or Othello, you're going to try Shakespeare's plays, and then you're going to try Venetian history. You'll try this. You'll try Shakespeare. It's just an attempt to, you see, until you write something, you're not apt to think at all. Renard, who was a great aphorist in France, once wrote, I find that when I do not think of myself, I do not think at all. But I think 99.9% of the world is like that. But if you think about yourself and go into the first person, I think that. Now you've started it. You are thinking now. And what you come up with will be thought, which otherwise it doesn't sit there on a camp stool waiting in your head. It's got to be something written, tried.
But in the evolution of your writing career, to done these magnificent novels, historical novels like Lincoln and Burr and Julian. I mean, these are the amount of scholarship that went into these. Were you finally liberated to go to the essay where you could really just say what you feel instead of have to?
No, because I do just as much research with an essay as I do with writing a book about Julian or Burr or Lincoln. They all involve study and making notes and making choices, what to believe. So much of what you read is not going to be true. And you have to have a pretty good detector to try and figure that out. And you don't always do it either.
You were asked at a conference about writer's block. And tell our viewers what you said. A young writer said, well, what about writer's block?
I said, be so grateful you have it. It means you don't have to do it. It also means you're not a writer anyway. Yeah. So just stay blocked.
Oh, probably a very liberating answer for them, yes. And what other advice would you have for young writers? Or for any writers?
Read. The problem today is people are too proud to read. They think they know everything anyway. And there's very little curiosity, which the schools have done a great job of eliminating. And I used to say when I was, I'm losing my voice, when I was an active politician, I used to go to PTA things. And if I could see there are a lot of parents there and so on, disturbed parents, I would say, what happens with our educational system? You all have had children in school. I said, I've never met a boring 6-year-old, and I've never met an interesting 16-year-old. What is done to them in that 10 years? How do you kill curiosity? Well, boy, I don't have to speak after that.
Yeah.
The entire audience is telling me what's wrong.
And so how would you change that?
Well, make them read, get the kids to read real books. I mean, when I first went to Russia, I was really deeply impressed by their educational system. Little 7, 8, 9 years old, they're reading stories by Chekhov.
Doesn't get any better than that.
No, it never does. They were reading great literature, and they respected it. I remember I went to a restaurant with Yevtushenkov, at that time the greatest poet in the so-called Soviet Union. And there was a marriage party going on in this restaurant, and one of the boys or girls looked out from the party and rushed out and shouted, Yevtushenkov, he's here, he's here. And they all rushed in, and they forced him up on a chair, stand on a chair. And he recited for an hour as his gift to the wedding party. And I thought, dear God, that would not have happened with Robert Lowell.
No, and no. Maybe with Robert Frost, but not.
Well, Robert Frost would have got up there before you could have held him back.
You end this wonderful, I just want to mention this to our viewers again, Gore Vidal's Point-to-Point Navigation, which is the second part of his autobiography. His first part of the autobiography was called Palimpsest, and that takes you up to 1940. Right, and then this is from 1940, and it ends on January 1st, 2006. And you end with a little recitation, of which I'm sure has been burned into your memory for many years. Do you want to give us those lines from Pope? I'm springing this on you. It's probably not fair.
I know you are.
We don't have.
No. I'm trying to clear I don't know what's happened, but it's, you have a lot of pollen around here?
Yes, we do. Oh, well, that's what it is.
I've got it all today.
Yes.
Nor public flame, nor private dares to shine, nor human spark, nor gift divine. Lo, the dread empire, chaos is restored. Light dies before the uncreating word. In thy hand, great anarch, lets the curtain fall.
Boom. And the curtain, yes.
It's the end of the Dunciad.
And you were compared to Pope, among many, many comparisons. And this is something that you had learned from...
I taught myself, and I wouldn't have minded learning it in school, but we never got around to Pope.
Oh, it's a shame. Well, we had learned things like The Raven, not quite Edgar Allan Poe, not quite as intellectually dense and compelling. I want to thank you for joining us today. Our guest is Mr. Gore Vidal, one of America's greatest men of letters. And I want to mention again, Point-to-Point Navigation, his new book, his autobiography, a few of his other books, Gore Vidal, The Last Empire, book of essays, and our 3-pound magnificent magnus opus, the National Book Award winner, a collection of essays called The United States. Really, really incredible reading. So we've come to the end of our first half. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Vidal.
Thank you.
And I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for joining us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by a grant from New Mexico Tech on the frontier of science and engineering education. For bachelor's, master's, and Ph.D. degrees, New Mexico Tech is the college you've been looking for. 1-800-428-TECH.